Hello friends, welcome to our lecture series on financial management. Myself Aditya P. Tripathi, I am once again here with you to continue our discussion on to the Treasury Management and Control part 4. This will be the part 4 of our discussion on Treasury Management and Control. So in today's lecture, I will be telling you about the controlling aspect of Treasury Management. In previous lecture of mine, I actually told you about the planning aspect of treasury management, where we actually discussed about going for cash forecasting, different motives of motives behind holding cash. Why do we hold cash? What are the different ways of preparing cash budget? What are the different methods of going for cash forecasting or short term forecasting? That is what we have discussed. Once we have understood that what is my cash requirement, once we have planned for our cash requirement, it becomes very important or pertinent for us to exercise control onto our cash. So whatever cash forecasting we have given, we have to understand, we have to examine whether those forecasts are holding true or not. So we have to actually compare those cash forecasts with the reality, that in reality or in actual life, what is happening in reality, what is happening with the cash position, whatever the forecasts were which we made, whether they are holding true or not. So we have to make a comparative analysis. If there is a shortfall of cash, we have to go for finding out the alternatives for arranging that particular cash. If there is a surplus, we have to find the most profitable avenues to invest that particular cash. So in this way, in this lecture of today, in this lecture of lecture of mine today, I'll actually be telling you how to control, how to exercise control over this particular treasury management, how to exercise control into this particular cash management aspect. So let's start with the control aspect of it. What we do into the controlling aspect. After preparation of cash budget, the financial manager has to ensure that there is no significant difference between the budgeted and actual cash flow occurs. We have to ensure that significant difference is not there between what we forecasted and what actually has happened. But still, we cannot deny to the reality. If something like that happens, we have to accept it, we have to face it. But the question comes how to manage with that. So for that, we have to exercise our controlling and review. As a fund manager, we have to resort to two basic methods. One is the controlling and the other is review. We have to first exercise control into this particular process, and once this control is not working, we have to review our future forecast. So it is actually giving a feedback to the planning aspect, where we were actually preparing the cash budget. After review, we will have to change our method of forecasting. Remember, there are two important decisions which we are supposed to take as fund manager as far as control is concerned. In treasury management and control, when it comes to controlling, two important decisions are there which we have to take. The first is how to speed up the cash collection and delay the disbursement in a better way. Remember, as a fund manager, our objective is twofold. The first is to expedite the cash collection process, that whatever debtors, whatever amount is blocked or logged into my debtors, I have to expedite, I have to speed up the cash collection, and simultaneously I have to ensure, I have to find out the ways where I can delay my disbursements in a better way, so that my net cash requirement is very nominal, or the cost of capital which I am going to incur on this particular account is very nominal. That is what we have to understand. But remember, if I am willing to expedite my cash collection process, remember and always keep this thing in mind, that my counterparts, my suppliers, for them I am the debtor, they might also be having such kind of policy. They would also wish to expedite their cash collection process. So on one hand, when I am saying that I have to expedite my cash collection process, I cannot deny to the fact that my suppliers do have this kind of policy, or they do have this kind of requirement, that they also wish to expedite their cash collection process. But in any case, this is our basic motive where it comes to controlling. So the first important decision is that we have to find out the ways to expedite the collection process. To the possible extent, as soon as possible, I have to collect my amount from my debtors, so that there is no delay and I am receiving cash from my debtors on time, and my cash cycle is running smoothly and properly, or you can say efficiently and effectively. Now the second important decision under the controlling aspect which we have to take is what should be the composition of marketable securities portfolio. Once I have surplus cash, as I told you, there can be two possibilities: either there is a shortage or there may be a surplus. If shortage is there, you have to find out the alternative plan, that from where to take loan, at which rate, at what rate I have to take loan. So we have to make arrangement from our banker. But on the other hand, we have to understand, if we have some surplus fund, we have to actually invest it into marketable securities. And remember, once I'm going to take a decision into marketable securities, I have to actually look for the safety, security, liquidity, everything. I cannot say that returns are very high, liquidity is good, but what about the safety? My money has to be safe. So that is what we have to decide into this particular controlling aspect of treasury management and control. So with these two important decisions in our mind, we have to actually start our discussion onto the controlling aspect of this treasury management and control. Before I tell you about the different components of it, we need to understand what are the factors which are actually responsible for efficient and effective cash management. They are prompt billing and mailing, and they actually go with the objective of our controlling aspect, that is we have to expedite our collection process. So the first very aspect which I'll be taking up today is the prompt billing and mailing. The way we go for billing promptly and mailing it to our customers so that the cash is collected on time. Unless my customer is aware that the bill has been raised, he or she will not pay. So the first and the foremost decision which we have to take here is the prompt billing and mailing. Once the prompt billing and mailing is done, the second aspect of this particular factor is accelerating cash collections. By offering discounts, by offering cash discounts, giving some lucrative offers to our customers, we can have this kind of policy, accelerating cash collections. The third is controlling disbursements. How to play with the float. I'll be telling you about the concept, very good concept of float, which is nowadays with the emergence of modernized banking system is almost redundant, but still we need to understand the way you can control your disbursement wherever you have to pay via check. The way you can play with the float, that I'll be telling you. What are the different types of floats? I'll tell you about the collection float, disbursement float and net float. I'll tell you how to play with the float and what are the hazards into this playing with the float. The way we play with the float, we have to understand there are certain rules and regulations which we have to follow while playing with the float. And last one will be investment of surplus cash. So this is actually the agenda of our discussion today, where we'll be actually talking about the controlling aspect of treasury management and control. So let's start with the first one, that is prompt billing and mailing. Sometimes when we look into this reasons for delay, that why my customer is not paying on time. So the reasons for delay is actually or delay in remittance is actually the time gap which exists between the date of preparing the invoice documents and the date on which they are mailed to the customers. At times we raise the invoice on time, but they are not properly or timely mailed to the customers. So unless the customers are receiving that particular document, they are not mentally prepared for making payment. They feel that my supplier will actually send the bill, the moment they will send the invoice, will actually be making the payment. So we have to be very prompt into billing and then mailing it to our customers. So if billing is done but mailing is not done, it means it is actually a halfway exercise. We have to understand, we have to actually ensure that the billing is done promptly, and the same is the promptness in terms of mailing it to the customers. So for controlling, or you can say expediting the cash collection process, or you can say for getting the speedy collection, to provide speed to our collection process, the first controlling which you have to follow is, the first step which you have to follow is prompt billing and mailing. Once it is mailed, the second aspect is how to accelerate cash collections. Invoice is prepared, it is mailed to the customer. Second aspect is how to accelerate the collections. So collections can be accelerated by reducing the lag between the time a customer pays the bill and the time the checks are collected and funds are made available for the firm's use. So we have to reduce the collection time. We have to reduce the time lag between the payment of amount by our customer and the time checks are collected into our bank account and money is available for our usage into our bank account. So we have to understand that the moment we are receiving the check, it need to be deposited to our bank under collection policy, under collection, so that the amount comes to our account. Although nowadays most of the business houses or enterprises, they prefer the online transactions. They always go for either RTGS or NEFT or IMPS depending on the size of payment. They always prefer to go for online payment system, so that this particular time lag between the writing of check, receiving the check by post and then sending it to bank for collection, and then bank taking 2-3 days for collecting, all that is actually eliminated. So with the emergence of modern banking system, or you can say the electronic transfer system, it is quite easy. So you can accelerate cash by this way. But suppose if your supplier is or your customer is willing to pay by check, in that case you have to be on your toes. You have to understand that the moment check is received, you have to immediately deposit it to your bank so that the money is collected on time. So this is the second aspect of it, how to accelerate the cash. The amount of checks actually sent by a customer which are not yet collected is called collection or deposit float. Suppose you received a check from your customer, but you don't deposit it to bank for collection. So this amount which is being blocked into it is known as collection or deposit float. A higher deposit float implies that more time is being taken to convert checks into usable funds. So if your company is having higher deposit float, it means you are not efficient and effective. Your money is you are taking a lot of time. You are taking greater time as usual to convert your checks into usable funds. The deposit float can be categorized into two parts. One is delay caused by mailing time. It is actually a time taken by the check in transit. Suppose your customer is sending check and there is a delay time in transit. Delay is there, so cause of that there can be delay, or it can be delayed. It can be due to processing time. So it is a time which is taken by the firm in processing checks for internal accounting purposes. Might be possible that you have your internal control system where you keep a record of it before sending it to your bank. So you need to actually review your policy and you need to change it so that your cash is converted. Your checks are converted into cash easily. It also depends upon the processing time which the banks and interbank systems take to credit the amount in the desired account. And the solution to all these problems is that you prefer the online payment. You resort to you request your customers to pay via online, so that there is no delay into this particular process of receiving check, writing check, mailing it to you, then you are sending it to bank, and in this entire time which is being consumed into this process is eliminated. So we need to go for re-engineering this entire process of receiving check or writing check. Here in this particular course of discussion, we need to understand what is float. There is a term which comes to our mind that is called float. At times my students are asking, sir, what is float? What is the float? Is it floating charges? Answer is no. It's not that floating charges which is there into the capital market when you are going to issue the shares or debentures. So the amount which you are spending on account of issue expenses, that is called floating charges. It has nothing to do with this float. This float is actually the time which you are taking, which you are taking in converting in getting your amount. It can be collection float, it can be disbursement float. Suppose if I take an example of disbursement float, I am writing a check. So from the date of writing check to the debit of my account, to the date on which my account is debited, this particular period is known as disbursement float. Suppose I wrote a check today in your name, you are my customer, I wrote a check in today's date, and what is happening, that check is actually my account is being debited after 2 months, although the check is having a validity of 3 months. So after 2 months, suppose if you deposited that check into your bank for collection, and bank is debiting my account after 2 months, so what will happen? Once it is presented, it is debited. So it means the disbursement float for me is 2 months, which means if I am writing check today, that doesn't mean that I need to pay today only. The time which I am taking in disbursement, that is called disbursement float. Now what is float? Float is actually an important technique used to reduce the length of cash cycle. I told you we have two objectives. One is to expedite our cash collection, the other is to delay the payment. And float is actually, it has been used by most of the business houses earlier to delay the payment process. The time gap between the date of writing a check and the date of its clearing is known as float. So what is float? The time gap between the date of writing a check and the date of its clearing is known as float. Suppose if it is for disbursement, if I am the person who is making payment, for me it will be disbursement float, but the person who has actually received this amount, for him or her it will be a collection float. So float is the same, it depends who is the party, whether it is the receiver or it is the giver. If the giver is there, if the person who is making payment, for him it would be a disbursement float, and for me it will be a collection float. So types of floats are of two types. Disbursement float, I told you, it is a time that elapses between the point when firm issues a check and the time at which the fund is actually debited from its account. Whereas the disbursement float can also be calculated in terms of rupee. If I look at the formula of disbursement float in terms of rupee, if we calculate, the formula goes like amount of checks issued in a day. So on an average, what is the amount of check which you are issuing in a day into disbursement float, that is in terms of days. Suppose if I am issuing checks of rupees 2000 every day and the disbursement float is of 7 days, so my disbursement float in terms of rupee will be 2000 into 7, 14,000 rupees. So 14,000 rupees will be your disbursement float. Disbursement float can also be in terms of your account balances. the firm's available bank balance minus firm's book balance, which means your available bank balance will be on the higher side as compared to your book balance cause of this float, cause you have issued the check in your books of records, in your book balance the balance of bank account is on the lower side, whereas the bank balance is showing a higher value cause those checks which were issued, they are not yet presented for collection or for the payment. So this is the formula of disbursement float. Next is collection float. It refers to the time gap between the receipt of a check and clearing of its amount into the bank account. Collection float can also be calculated in terms of rupees, just like disbursement float. The formula for collection float is amount of checks received in a day. There it was amount of checks issued in a day. Here it is for collection float, it is amount of checks received in a day into collection float in terms of days. So collection float will be computed in terms of days. This is something which is very specific to the organizations. You will be calculating and then you will be telling. Net float will be disbursement float minus collection float. So we have to understand that whatever amount is actually blocked, whatever amount we are saving, whatever time we are saving due to this particular lag in payment is actually your float, and cause of this you can actually delay your payment process. But remember, my dear students, if you are playing with the float, the same can be done by your customers also, by your customers also. Cause they can also play with the float. In that case you will not be able to achieve your first and foremost objective, that is providing speed to your collection process, cause they will also say that we have mailed the check to you, check is mailed to you, once it is coming to you, you have to deposit it into your bank account. So the end of the story will be, to cut short the story, what we should do, we should not play with the float. We should try to follow the transparent process of payment, that is online payment services. We should make use of that so that there is a speedy recovery of cash. There is no delay into the payment process. On real time basis the payment can be transferred into your bank account. So the same should be applicable for your suppliers also. You should also follow the same process. But still, since it has been the past practice into the Indian scenario that most of the business houses, they have been using this particular very concept of float. Actually they have been enjoying this particular concept of float. Cause of this they have been saving lot of money on account of working capital requirement. They have saved lot of money. So we need to understand the way this float works. After understanding this particular float, let's see how to calculate the collection float, right? How to calculate this particular net float, disbursement float and collection float. So let's have a problem. Suppose there is a company called LK Limited. It issues checks of rupees 3,000 per day and receives checks of rupees 2,000 per day. So this is the policy of the company. On an average, checks of rupees 3,000 per day you are issuing and you are receiving checks of rupees 2,000 per day. The payment of disbursement float is 7 days, whereas the collection float is 2 days on an average. So disbursement float is of 7 days, which means from the date of writing check to the debit of your account, the timing is 7 days, which is known as disbursement float, whereas the collection float is 2 days on an average, which means whatever check you are receiving, you are immediately running to the bank and depositing into your bank account, and it takes 2 days on an average. And you have to find different types of floats for the firms and come in. Try to understand, you have to find, the moment we say that you have to find different types of float. Now when we say different types of float, there are 3 types of float. One is disbursement float, the other is collection float, and third one is net float. Net float is disbursement float minus collection float. So let's solve this particular question. It is quite simple. The firm is issuing checks of rupees, whatever amount is given, rupees 3,000 per day, amount of checks issued in a day, rupees 3,000. Disbursement float given in the question 7 days. Once we multiply, we get the amount of disbursement float, that is rupees 21,000, which means for 7 days, if you are writing checks of rupees 3,000, after 7th day you need to make payment. So you are actually not spending a single rupee for 7 days, or you can say you are saving your 21,000 rupees on account of this disbursement float, cause your account is going to be debited after 7th day, which means for 7 days you keep on writing the checks and there is no payment which is made out of your account. This is called disbursement float. Now the same will be the process for computation of collection float. For the collection float, I told you the formula, amount of checks received in a day into collection float, that is in terms of day. Question tells us 2,000 rupees is a check which you are receiving on an average, and collection float is 2 days, which means 4,000 rupees is your collection float, which means your money is blocked for 2 days only. So for 2 days, if average collection is 2,000 rupees per day, you are only sacrificing 4,000 rupees. What is the net float? Disbursement float minus collection float, that is rupees 17,000, which means you are on a positive side, on a higher side. you are actually making use of float, and 17,000 rupees is being saved by you. But to cut short the story, what is the solution to this particular float? How to expedite the cash collection process is electronic modes of payment, that is receiving and making payment via RTGS, NEFT or electronic fund transfer, whatever system you have, accordingly you should make payment, and the same should be the mode of receiving the payment. So in this way we can expedite the cash collection process, which was the second objective. Traditionally we have been discussing various techniques to reduce the deposit float, and there are two very popular techniques which were used by the firms earlier to reduce the deposit float. One was decentralized collection system and the other is lockbox system. Before I explain you about these two systems, cause still in most of the business houses they are actually following this process, cause somehow they are hesitant into following this particular electronic fund transfer system, although it is rapidly the mindset of people is changing rapidly. So we cannot deny to the emergence of the modern banking system and the benefits of it, but still for the sake of understanding that what we have been doing earlier to reduce the time, reduce the deposit float, for this we have been actually resorting to two methods. I'll quickly tell you about the decentralized collective system and lockbox system. What is decentralized collection system? Into this particular system it was very much useful for large firms which have their business spread across the country, or you can say spread over a large geographical area, and at that time we didn't have this kind of core banking solution or centralized banking solutions which nowadays banks have. So in order to reduce the collection process, what business houses were doing, they were actually having the concept of concentration banking under this particular system. What they were doing, into this a firm was actually operating through a number of collection centers rather than from a single collection center at the head office. So in place of having one collection center into our head office, what we are doing, we are actually decentralizing the collection process. We have various centers at different in different areas, in different geographical locations, where easily the checks can be collected, and for that what they were doing, they were actually appointing certain collection agencies there, collection agents there, and this particular process was minimizing the lag between the mailing time from customers to the firm and time when the firm can actually use the funds. What was happening, those collection agents, they were local to that particular area, they were collecting checks from those customers and depositing it to the central account of this particular firm. So this was actually a system which was resorted to earlier to ensure the you can say expeditious collection of cash, or you can say to provide speed to the recovery process. And earlier when we didn't have this core banking solution or centralized banking solution from the banks, what we were doing, we were wasting lot of time into this collection process of check used to go to the bank and they used to take 7 to 8 days in collection process. So that particular problem is now sorted out. We don't have such kind of problem. So previously what we have been doing, that I have told you that we have been following this particular system of decentralized collection centers where the firm was making use of this particular system. Another system which was very much in use was lockbox system. It was just like availing post box facility of post offices. As far as Indian scenario is concerned, they were using the services of postal department, that is called post box system, where they were taking on rent the post boxes provided by the post office, and bankers were given that particular charge of collecting those checks from that particular post box. For that, although definitely the banks were charging huge amount and there has to be a cost, there was some cost which was charged by the banker, but the benefit, the best part of it was banker was not only collecting the check but also preparing the entire statement for yours. So that was very much beneficial for the business houses at that point of time. So what we did into lockbox system, in this system to reduce the time lag between the receipt of checks and their deposit in the bank, we were making use of post box facility. Under this system, a number of collection centers were established by the firm depending upon the customer location and volume of remittances. So suppose in a particular area the volume is very high, volume of remittance is very high, so obviously you will have more number of post boxes as compared to the other areas where you have very small number of remittances. The firm hires a post office box at each collection center and instructs its customers to mail their remittances to the box, so that easily it is collected into that, and the firm's local bank is given the authority to pick up the remittances directly from the box, and the bank then deposits the checks in the firm's account. It also prepares detailed records of the checks, which is then used by the firm for the internal accounting purposes. But remember, my dear students, nowadays this logbox system, which were at later stage used by most of the telecom service providers to collect their bill payments, postpaid bill payments, they were making use of it. Now it is almost into a stage of redundancy. It is almost redundant, but still, for understanding that numerically how to go for examining the cost and benefit of this particular logbox system, let's have a look onto this particular logbox system. Suppose if we have to take a decision on logbox system, we conduct a cost benefit analysis. There is a company called Shruti Limited, and it is planning to set up a logbox system to expedite the cash collection. With the help of following information, you have to suggest whether it should install this particular logbox system or not. Average number of daily payments 25, average size of payment rupees 4,000, savings in mailing time 2 days. If you are resorting to this method, you will be saving in mailing time for 2 days. Annual rent of logbox is rupees 5,000, and bank charges for operating the logbox is 36,000. So this is the information which is given. Banker is going to charge 36,000 rupees for operating the logbox. Annual rent of logbox is rupees 5,000, and rate of interest is 15%. Now we will be conducting a cost benefit analysis of this. Let's have a look at the cost side. Annual rent of logbox is rupees 5,000. We have written here. Bank charges for operating the logbox is rupees 36,000. There is no other cost which is mentioned in the question. So the total cost for Shruti Limited will become rupees 41,000. This is the total cost when you are going for taking this particular lockbox, when you are willing to avail this lockbox facility at your business houses, for your particular business house. Let's look at the benefit. What is the benefit? Benefit will be the amount which I am saving in terms of interest, in terms of cost of my capital. So we have to understand what is the average number of daily payments, 25, average size of payment rupees 4,000, savings in mailing time is 2 days. So what is the amount which we have saved? 25 is the number of daily payment, size is 4,000 rupees, so 25 into 4,000, 1 lakh rupees is the effective amount in terms of daily payments and size of payment. And since we are going to save in mailing time for 2 days cause of this practice, so we will be saving a total amount of rupees 2 lakh. So 25 into 4,000 into 2, that becomes rupees 2 lakh. Now on this 2 lakh rupees, we will have to charge interest at the rate of 15%, which is given in the question, and that comes to be rupees 30,000. So cost of this logbox system, if I am going to avail, it is rupees 41,000, and the benefit is rupees 30,000. So the question comes whether we should go for it or we should not go for it. The cost is rupees 41,000, benefit is 30,000. Obviously, I would say that benefit is greater than cost, so we should not resort to this logbox system as far as this particular analysis is concerned. So in this way, to expedite the collection process, even if you are going to resort to a particular method, say logbox system or concentration banking or any other method for that matter, if you are going to adopt, before adopting we need to conduct a cost benefit analysis. In financial management, the best part of it or the beauty of this particular subject is that you have to conduct a quantified logical, you have to give a quantified logical answer to whatever logic you are giving in support of your decision. So before giving your decision, you have to conduct cost benefit analysis, just like we have done for this particular logbox system. So to expedite our cash collection process, we can either use this particular concentration banking, or you can make use of logbox system or any other method for that particular matter. The next aspect of our discussion will be controlling disbursements, that how to control disbursement, and we have some other aspects also, how to invest into marketable securities, that I will be dealing in the next lecture of mine. In today's lecture, what we have understood, let's recapitulate. We have actually started with the controlling aspect of this particular treasury management and control, and in this aspect I told you that once planning is done, we have to go for control and review. So in planning, what we did, we went for cash forecasting, we prepared cash budget, we learned how to prepare cash budget. Once it is understood, what we have to do, we have to actually exercise control and review. Under control and review, I told you we have two objectives. The first is to expedite the cash collection process, and the second is where to invest our surplus cash which is available with us. So I hope you must have understood the controlling aspect of this treasury management and control. I'll be coming to you again with some more ideas about this particular topic in next lecture of mine. I hope you must have understood and enjoyed today's lecture of mine. Thank you so much.